Um, our next speaker is Chris Harvey. And Chris is a community linguist for the Stockbridge-Munsee Mohican community, where he works with learners to revitalize the Mohican language, which has been dormant since the early 20th century. So his work is all about training new speakers. He is also very well known as a computational linguist, has partnered with communities across North America in IT projects, notably developing keyboard layouts for typing in Indigenous languages. And he's been instrumental in getting amendments to the Unicode character set to accommodate Indigenous writing systems. He's also given dozens of conference talks on language revitalization, chiefly about the many kinds of language immersion. So thank you very much for being able to share your knowledge with us today, Chris.
Thank you, Nick. Can everyone hear me? And you can see the presentation? Perfect. Go naman thitmo, kwa wa kom nitmo, gataw machan mak, jothak ma egenil akit gok, onewin dan noche amtonam te tok. Bore dapaw bach roiso, dwi eisiau diolchi ffrindiau I sy'n byw yn yn hir Mohican, sy'n I helpu I ddysgu'r hen iaith. Dechreuawn ni. Let's begin. So I'd like to start with how our Mohican language class was before. This is before we all got locked down, and we would meet at a library in the community. I would be on a big screen TV from here in Hamilton, Ontario, and all the learners would be sitting around a table with a microphone at the center and a webcam off to the side. Now, this wasn't ideal at all, and we never really got the technology working smoothly. There was always 10-15 minutes before every class while we were trying to get the equipment working. But our goals at the time were to let people know that the language was coming back, because the last fluent speakers passed away in the 1930s. And we also wanted to keep our eyes open for the super learners, so those who had the time and the drive to learn more quickly than everyone else, and make sure that we turn those super learners into the next generation of instructors. So situational pressure started before the pandemic, because people from outside the community, either a couple hours drive away or across the continent, would like to log in and attend the courses. So we started doing a video chat where we still had everyone in the library and then a number of little heads around the edges. And then once COVID comes along, we all switched to remote. And it worked better than we expected for some people, but then we lost other learners at the same time. The learners who it worked best for were those who had to actually leave home to go find a mobile spot. So one person went to a parking lot outside the community center. Another one went to a neighbor's house. They stuck with it and did really well. The people who worked from home didn't work out as well. And we ended up splitting the course into a core group made up of our super learners and a more fluid beginners group that is now being led by one of those core learners. All right, so we have an intro class. This is the more fluid class, and we repeat every 10 weeks or so. If people can attend all the intro classes and show that they're comfortable with the content, we move them up to the next level. And the responsibilities for these online classes are very different from a traditional class. And for the intermediate students, we make sure we sort of build in a social contract. And part of that social contract is showing up. It's seems to be easy to miss classes online as opposed to going somewhere. And part of the social contract is to do a lot of work outside of class time. So we do about 4 or 5 hours a week online, but it's part of the contract that people will spend maybe another 2 hours a day working. And I'll talk about the kinds of things that we work on outside of class time. And the other thing we do is ask that people interact with their family and friends in the language, even if their family and friends don't care. You know, they're not learning or whatever, but we're trying to get the learners used to not saying English when they don't have to. And we also are very upfront about the fact that we're all going to make mistakes, myself included, because we're bringing this language back from dormancy, from being asleep. So I might come back a week later and say, remember that thing we were talking about last week? Yeah, I went back to the sources and it turns out we didn't get it quite right. So we try and be very understanding of our mistakes, and emphasize respect and responsibility to yourself and to the others in the class. So in-person teaching is very centralized. We all gather in one spot, sit in chairs, and at the end of the class leave. The internet is very spread out. So not all of the class happens during our meetups. Not all of the course occurs at that time. Some of it does, and some of it we use other apps or online domains. And for those, we have referees. So a referee would maintain one aspect of the course. So as the instructor, I kind of referee the language. We have another person who takes care of video content. We have another learner who runs the social media site. It's all too much for one person to do, as well as all of us learn the languages. So what these other places take the place of are real world, let's say coffee cafes, meeting in people's houses, activities that we could do outside. None of those are available to us for virus and distance reasons. So we've tried to make domains on the internet where we can hang out and speak to each other in the language. So it's if something's kind of falling by the wayside, there's a referee to kind of snap us all into attention, say, hey, nobody's been visiting the social media site yet. Make sure you come by. So the first thing I want to talk about I guess the rest of the presentation is going to be very practical in terms of how we've had to modify teaching and learning in the online environment. And it's really different because so many of the cues that we get face to face are difficult or impossible to pick up when we're speaking in a chat, let's say. Now we've all gotten better at it over the past year or so, but there's still a lot of things to be aware of and to make the class run smoothly. And one of those is class navigation. So managing how we speak to each other in the language without using English at all. And to not interrupt each other, which is really easy to do. So, for example, we've got navigation vocabulary. These are all things that are learned immediately when somebody comes to the beginner's course. And this navigation vocabulary is important because it keeps the flow of the teaching smooth. So one of the common ones is non pe. Again, say it again because my internet crapped out, or because the phone rang, or I didn't really hear you very well. Non pe. So instead of the student saying, sorry, can you say that again? Non pe. Or not damawi, help me. More useful is not damawa, where, help that person. They're having trouble. You can help them. There's a few others up there. Kiptona, you're muted. That happens a lot. Kiptona. And we also go through a list of question words that are gonna, keep on coming up again and again. And so these are all kind of pinned to everyone's mind as we're going through the class, because it turns out that a good 50% of what we talk about in class isn't material, it's us talking. It's us chatting, having a conversation. So we need to make sure that right from the beginning, people have a way to navigate the class without dropping back into English. Dropping into English is our last resort. So we use a lot of hand signals. Let's see if this video is going to work. There we go. One of the issues of online teaching is everybody talking at the same time. And when two people speak, all the audio just sort of gets blurry and fuzzy and nobody can hear anybody. So we just use a bunch of hand signals for like yes, next slide, or no, sta. And they're very clear and obvious because we're all looking at each other in tiny little boxes on a screen. And most face-to-face conversation is very subtle in maybe the way that we move our eyes or a hand gesture or whatever. Online, nobody picks those up. So nice big hand signals. Those get used a lot. Or everybody, can't hear you. Maui. All right. So we've got our social contract figured out. We have some navigation set up. The teaching materials are ready to go. Before class, a lot of things can be done. Class time is very valuable and limited. So we have 4 or 5 hours a week that we can look at each other face to face, but that's not enough hours to actually learn to speak a language. It might take 40 hours a week or 30 hours a week over a couple months, 3, 4, 5 months. So we got to use our time outside of our chats. And one of these things we do is to prep students to kind of prime them before the class begins so that they've been able to hear the sounds of the new words. They've already been able to practice them by kind of chatting along. I'll show you in a second. And they're starting to learn the context of some new vocabulary in a scene or a situation instead of like in a list of words to learn. So here's an example of a preparation dialogue. So we run this, provide it to the students before they show up. So they can just listen, get used to the sounds, practice along if they'd like. Let's see. No sound? Ah, I was afraid of that. Okay, so I'll just, not much is going to have sound in this presentation. All right, so what was going on there is we had, this is our video guy, and he makes these videos just with his phone and edits them with wevideo.com. And it was just entering someone's house and what do you talk about, offering coffee, that sort of thing. And so this is provided before the class, no English at all. People can just listen to it over and over again and associate the sounds with watching people have a conversation. And that means that they've already heard these words before. They might not know what each one means, but when we go into class time, they've already heard this stuff. And they can pick up the new material much, much quicker. after having done this. So we like that. Okay. We also use this app called Quizlet, which is a flashcard app. And this is also great for doing sorry, I'm getting right. So the Quizlet app is great for setting up a way for learners to interact with listening and seeing images. It is pretty heavy on the written word, so it's really kind of the only place where we deal with spelling and reading. But it's been really great because the learners now know that these flashcards, let's have it kind of running here, that these flashcards are available for them to see later on, and they can not have to worry about taking notes, not worry about writing stuff down, and they can just interact in class knowing that this sort of information will be there for them to use later. Okay, so we found that a lot of stuff can be learned ahead of time. We can associate pictures with vocabulary. Odile gave you tips on playing. Okay. Maybe at the end, I'll see if I can't get the video to work, and we'll go back and look at that. Right. So, right. So we're associating pictures with the vocabulary using let's say the video or the Quizlet. We've also given people ahead of time a way to know the path of the conversation. So we know that the first kind of stuff is knocking on the door. The next thing that they're going to see is have a seat. The next thing, someone's going into the kitchen. Having a video and Quizlet available ahead of time lets people hear pronunciation clearly as once the chat begins, audio quality drops precipitously. And so all of these things we do ahead of time, the class is used to bring it together. So all the building blocks are there first. We spend our precious time together to put it into a conversational situation. All right. During class, we want to use as few computery things as possible. So this is during the live session. Reason being is that on computers, things go wrong. So I want to put video in my Google Slides and it doesn't work. I wanted to use this bell or this whistle inside of my my chat, and it doesn't work for somebody else. So during the class itself, we want everything as simple, because if it can go wrong, it will go wrong. Outside of class is when we can take advantage of more. Okay, so this video here, I'll just sort of explain quickly what it is. Right. Oh, I'm going to go to the next one. Okay.
Sorry, Chris. Have you tried removing your headset? Because we should hear if you do that.
Are you seeing the video?
We're seeing it, we just can't hear it.
The problem is my audio is going through a voice mod software, so it's not actually coming from my headphones. I have 3 or 4 different kind of setups going on here. You know what? I'll export it with the video in, and you can download it and watch it. I think that might be easier. I don't want to fiddle around. The other thing is the headphones are the only audio I have. I don't have any external speakers. Okay. So anyway, the things in class that I want to talk about are always using people's names. In a classroom, physical space, it's easy to look at somebody and they know it's their turn to go. in an online space, we're all just faces surrounding a screen. So we're always using names constantly. Instead of it's like, it's your turn, we'd say, "Machkweno amtona." And so we always use people's names. And because technology doesn't work, we just use these little cue cards, right? That's Machono. He's very angry. And we can put those, I got a mountain, get a laminator. Laminators are great. I just have these things because the cue cards don't break. They always work. I've got all kinds of props and that I'll show in a second because they work. The fewer things that you use during the live session, the fewer things that'll break. All right. Good. So yeah, I've got my cue cards, fantastic. And I also got a bunch of props. These are why props are good, because it's hard online to talk about, let's say, sitting or standing, because I end up, having to stand up or sit down. In a classroom, these things are easy. Online, it's really tough. So I have these little guys. I rated my kids' Playmobil collection, and I can have, Pchanem Apo, Pchanem Nechen. It's just so much easier to show these sorts of actions. I can Pamitho. Better yet, have the learners bring their own little action figures or bring their own little props, and we can do this sort of activity together. When we're doing like a kitchen unit, and we've got, kan, na kan, everybody can hold up their coffee mug when they're learning the word. So we're trying to keep things as audio, video, and tactile as possible. All right. If you haven't played with an online whiteboard, they're cool and they're trouble. So this is Miro, which is, the online whiteboard that I've been using. And it's really neat because we can put pictures up there. We can move, everybody can click on the whiteboard and move their own pictures around, draw arrows, circle things. So it's kind of nice to have the whiteboard there, but I found that once it's up, everybody just looks at the whiteboard and they stop looking at each other. And it's a danger that now the focus just becomes this sort of game of moving stuff around the whiteboard. So if and when it's going to be used, we open it up, do the activity that needed the whiteboard, and then shut it down, close it, take it out of play. And because we're really looking for face-to-face, eye-to-eye conversation, more so than all of us staring at a board. The other danger of it is because you can write things on it, there's a tendency to turn it into like an old school 1970s language class blackboard where you just write up conjugations and that sort of thing. And then again, it's you've taken it out of a conversational class and we've turned it into a something we know doesn't work very well. So even myself, I have to fight the urge not to just write stuff on there and move on, trying to do things orally first at all times. Okay. So a bit of a review why online is different is that we get few to no conversation cues of whose turn it is to talk. Are you asking me? Are you asking somebody else? So we have to be very overt about those sort of things. I found it's nice online to have a intermediate student show up to the beginners class, just so that when, not the language drags, the language learning drags, but when people who aren't used to working in the online environment can see what it's like for a couple people who are very experienced. Now, because our beginners classes are 10 weeks and anybody can show up at any point during those 10 weeks and cycle it again and again, there is typically a nice balance of people who are experienced online and those who aren't. And those who aren't tend to pick things up from those who are. We do have a minimum or a maximum student cap. If 15 people show up, it's really hard to keep everybody busy. So we try and keep that lower. Hasn't been that much of a problem, but it can be. And we try and do all the technology stuff ahead of time. So if somebody wants to join the class, we talk to them the day before and try to make sure everything's working. And really, we've been at this for over a year and we're still testing. We're still play testing this. The hardest thing I've found is to stay in the language, to not use English when somebody's computer isn't working. That's been tough. All right. So, in between classes now, the goal is that the learners can then turn around and use the class with their own household. But the students themselves, the same group of, let's say, 5-6 people who meet 4 or 5 times, 4 or 5 hours a week, in between classes, they just go back to their regular lives. In an immersion boot camp style course, you're with 20 other learners for a couple months, day and night, and you tend to create your own cadre of friends, and you do stuff together, you socialize together. That's really hard to do online, so we've had to explicitly build virtual domains, places where we can hang out, places where we can just pop by a couple times a day, even if there's no class as such. And to do this, it was really key to visit them regularly. The referee should remind people. Internet stuff dies when people stop coming because the activity hasn't happened for the past 2 or 3 weeks. So one of the things we like to do is play games because computers are good at that. And this isn't like a game in class, but something that we do to hang out. So we play poker online. We've had to come up with all the vocab for all the hands of poker and that sort of thing. And we could just play this for half an hour when we all have time. We do a lesson in class about how to play, and then we say we'll meet up Tuesdays at 6:30, and we make sure we do it. One of our students is really into online multiplayer role-playing video games, and so we're going to start, I don't know, playing whatever the kids are doing these days instead of World of Warcraft. I'm planning on starting now that baseball season is here. We're all going to log on, watch a baseball game at the same time, and have audio going. Yeah, and that'll be cool. We'll get to just talk about players and the game. And so these are things that you would do normally with your friends in person. We can't do that, so we have to kind of be creative to share our spare time together in the language. So we've had to come up with vocabulary. Trash talk has been very popular, so that we can swear at each other, tell each other off during poker games. Yeah, we got really fortunate that one of the 1930s linguists and one of the last native speakers sat down and wrote out all the swear words, so we get to use those. That was a gold mine. And we do have a social media. I'm not a big social media guy, but one of the learners is. And so in our social media, we're trying to get as much audio, video as possible, lots of video. And it's also a great place for lurkers to show up. So people who aren't ready to join the class, but are interested in knowing what's going on in the language. So we give them like a Facebook group or something like that where they can pop by. So I want to just cover a couple more points. With people with slow internet is a problem. So we use Marco Polo, and it's a way that you can, thank you. It's I've got a timer here. It's a way that we can speak to each other not in real time. So if one of the students has a bad internet connection, I can speak into the Marco Polo, make an audio video message. They can wait the 4 or 5 seconds for it to download on their phone. They can watch it and respond. So it's a bit slow, but it's way better than trying to pick out what someone's saying from a poor internet connection. So the last thing I want to talk about is something really practical, and I'll go through it quickly, is the equipment. What sort of stuff do we need? The first issue that comes up is money, because apps and equipment cost money. Like in my teacher setup here, I got 3 monitors and microphones and video cameras and all that. And so at first it's like, geez, this is the internet, I should get everything for free. But we have really compared costs, and the amount of money we save on gas, not having to drive places, is easy enough to buy all the software and hardware we need. So spend the money, get the paid version, because you don't want to be stuck with the limitations of a free trial. Get fast internet if you can. Like I said, one of our guys sits beside a building with high-speed internet. Another student goes to his neighbor's house. Better to have that little bit of inconvenience than having slow internet. We talked about microphones. Webcams are great. I've got a webcam right here. I don't use the one on my laptop because everyone looks up sort of from this nose angle, and after 4 hours of that, it can be annoying. So a nice webcam focused on your face is really nice. I'm not going to talk about that one. Virtual cameras are really cool because I can very, very quickly just put stuff. I can put text up on my screen if I need to. I can bring in graphics. Like if I want to talk about the different seasons, I could just bring graphics, and that works really well. So that's using a virtual camera. So my webcam is going through this virtual camera software where I can manipulate things, and then it goes into the Zoom or the Google Meet or the WebEx, and I can put in sound effects as well using software called VoiceMod. And finally, almost finally, is icons are really cool. So we're dealing in Mohican with a language that doesn't follow the English pronoun patterns. You know, we have to deal with inclusives and exclusives and that sort of thing. So I went onto a website called icons8.com, and I downloaded a bunch of these icons for so that I can just pop these up on the screen when you know we're dealing with, oh, okay, well, Kia, I want second person singular, Kia, and I could just show the picture of the green person pointing to the other green person. And we use these same color patterns in our online dictionary so that we can associate colors with yeah. Oh, and get a nerd. Nerds are really handy because they can make all this stuff work. If you're not a nerd, find one and make sure that they help you set up your system first, because the last thing you need as a teacher of a language or a learner of a language is trying to figure out how technology works. So Onewe, thank you so very much. I hope I can answer any questions you have, and if I can I'll export my entire presentation, put a link up, give it to Nick, and then you can watch it with all the videos.
Thank you so much, Chris. You've really given us a roadmap to revitalization classes online. I found it tremendously eye-opening. Ear-opening too. So, so I wonder. There are a couple of questions here. So we had a question from Mario Zil. Do you use spaced repetition with Quizlet?
I don't. Oh,
Okay,
that's a
Skills?
short answer. I'm not sure what it is, so I'm gonna say I don't. With Quizlet, I really like that as the instructor, I get to see how many people are actually using it. So I can see who's putting in the time and effort when they log in, and I can see what lessons they're working on. I try not to get too technical with it, just because, again, the more technical I get, the more things fail. But Quizlet is great because I can record audio on my nice microphone and they can listen to it again and again. Certain sounds, like the difference between a glottal stop and a K and a T word finally, are important in the language, and nobody can hear them online. So I have people listen to the Quizlet ahead of time, and they can hear the difference between these kind of word final stops that they just miss. You know, they just it's. I'm sure if we ran a spectrogram or something on it, that there would be no difference. Yeah. Oh, and just while I'm still sharing or not?
You're not sharing at the moment.
Okay. Let's see. Oh, I'm now a presenter. Okay. Yeah, I just wanted to share my screen because there's a question on how I do obviation with the icons. And so if you look on the far right, the pink and the purple, the third singular obviative is katakan. You know, I'm just saying the other one. And so here I have a person pointing to a person pointing to another person. So that's our obviative. Or in the bottom right corner, kataka, I have a person pointing to a person pointing to a group of people for the obviative plural. So that's how we do it.
Very clever.
Yeah, it's great because that's how relationship words, like, you know, her father, his mother. Then we can look at the icon and say, okay, here's me, here's her, and here's her father. So we can see the steps it takes to get there. Okay, I can unshare now.
There's also a question from Karen Tillmeyer about the name of the icon site that you mentioned.
Icons 8.
Icons
Let me
8.
put it up here. I'll put it right here. I think what I'll also do is I'll send out a on my link with my presentation. I also have a list of all the software and hardware that I talked about in the presentation, and I'll send that out to you and you can see it.
There's also a question from Cecile. Did you notice any change in attendance or proficiency after switching to online only?
I saw a drop off on the total numbers of people from the community. So we would, let's say we had 7, 8, 9 people coming from the community to the library. When we went online, we lost about more than half of them, but we gained people from New York State, you know, the old homeland. We gained people from Milwaukee, California, places where community members have moved away. They came, and it's really great for them because there's not a lot of contact necessarily with the culture, depending on where you live. So we won some, we lost some. Right now, we're trying to figure out how to get people from the community excited again, because we used to do a lot of events. You know, we used to, when I was in Wisconsin, I would go to the library and we would elders would come in, hang out, and remember things that their grandparents used to say. And it was wild because they would be talking to each other. And these are people, oh, our language is extinct. Nobody knows anything, whatever. After 10 minutes, you know, my grandfather would say "Ndameka" when people would come to his house. Oh yeah, and then they would have Satswan Danbolten on the table. and another speaker, oh yeah, I got taught how to count to 5. And so we used to have these events and people would get excited. Now we can't have those events. So we're trying to figure out a way to get local people involved. It's easy to get people from far away involved. It's hard to get local.
And it looks like Cecile has a question that speaks directly to that too. After the pandemic is finally over, this is it's the question that I think is going to be central to the latter half of this workshop. Are you considering switching to a bimodal format, both in person and online? Because I think this is going to be one of the strengths of the online technology going forward.
Here's what we're going to do. We're going to keep the class online, especially because they're just getting fiber optics laid in the community. So we're going from like bad cell signals to fiber optics. So that should be an improvement. But what we're going to do is teach in people's houses with the whole family. So we're taking it away from the miscellaneous people showing up to a class, and we're going to offer family classes where the entire family signs up. So, you know, from grandparents, uncles, cousins, whatever, people will show up and it come to a house. We will go to that house and we will go through daily life stuff in the language with that family. So that is our plan. We're not going to bother to go back to a classroom environment with classroom curriculum. We're going to go right into people's houses and just learn how to sweep the floor, learn how to plant potatoes, whatever they do in that house, that's what we're going to learn.
And then we had one question from Lane Schwartz. How is cost handled? Is everyone volunteering? Is any payment involved for anyone?
So we wanted to pay learners. We want learning the language to be a full-time job. And we were sort of in the midst of getting that financial stuff sorted out when everything fell apart. So we're going to try and do that again starting next year. The money is coming from, we'll see. It's hard enough getting money for the people who teach the intro classes. They're not getting paid enough. For a year, I didn't get paid anything. I just volunteered, which is something I do a lot of. So we're all part-time at best, but we're doing it anyway because it's waiting for money means it'll never start. So we're doing it in reverse order. We're doing it as volunteers, hoping that somebody will kick in some cash.
I think there was also a question from Wentiosha.
Yes. Hi, Chris. Thank you for your presentation. I'm just curious to know what platform do you use for your classes outside of your live sessions? Like, do you use Google Classroom or what? Because I currently work for a cultural center where we're doing our immersion classes online, but they're doing it entirely on Zoom all day, every day. And so I was interested, like your format of how you uploaded a video prior to the classes. So where are you uploading those videos to? Thank you.
Sure. I put everything into Slack. Slack is I guess a research and development kind of shared space, and we just use that. It works really well. If you're not familiar with Slack, you can watch a video on YouTube and see the sort of things that it does. But the reason why I like it is because it's very searchable and it just keeps all of us in one spot. You know, where if I know that somebody asked a question, I know it'll be in Slack. I don't have to go through emails or check Facebook or that sort of thing. Slack is what I use. Now, that made me think of something maybe I didn't talk about, was we try and use as many different pieces of software as possible, which sounds odd. But the reason we do that is because of when one of them goes out of service, we don't want our entire workflow to crash. So we used to do, what was the old Google? Was it Meetup or something? I can't remember. We used to use that as our video chat, and then Google shut it down. Or you can be using Google Plus, and then Google shuts it down. Or you know, maybe Quizlet one day denies my credit card and I can't get into it anymore. So if we use 15, 20 different pieces of software, exactly what they're built to do, when one of them goes out of business, we don't have to replace our entire workflow. We just find an answer for that one thing. And so we're being very centralized, or sorry, very decentralized in how we do stuff, because we've had it where the tools we use disappear. The internet
Great,
is
thank you.
ephemeral.
Thank you again for a great presentation. And everyone, we now have a break for 15 minutes. And so grab some lunch and or whatever the local meal is in your time zone. And we will reconvene in about 15 minutes for our panel discussion. Thank you, everyone.